Hey everyone, what up? Mankaiser here. Now suffice to say that this year has been a great year for the Atelier series, as not only we had the amazing Atelier Yumia, which is a brand new mainline and original Atelier game that offered new things as well as a new take on the overall Atelier formula, but we also had recently Atelier Wesiana, the Red Alchemist and the White Guardian, which was a return to form and sort of leaned back to the more traditional and classic Atelier feel that the fans really love. And also, just upcoming next week, we are also getting the Atelier Ryza Secret Trilogy Deluxe Pack, which will bring back the Ryza series, but now with new content as well as new playable characters and some nice quality of life features. So yeah, suffice to say, Atelier fans have been eating this year. And that leads me to wonder what the future holds for the Atelier series after that, since post-2025. As outside of that, alongside also we had both the Atelier characters like Ryza, Sophie, and Yumia also be as guest warriors in Warriors Abyss. There's a lot to think about regarding of what could happen for the Atelier series going forward, especially with some rather recent comments that producer of the series, Junji Hosoi, has sort of mentioned that leans more interesting things regarding its series future. So I thought it would be a good idea to speculate and talk about it, and I think it would be a nice topic to rumble. A while back, we did have an interview with Junji Hosoi from the outlet known as Automaton Media, where he states that the Atelier team does admit its mistakes and that they all want the feedback that they can get. So going from there, I think it's time to see what I personally think we should go on with the future for the Atelier series. Obviously, given the fact that Atelier games normally like to have sequels to form a trilogy, I can expect we can obviously see a follow-up to Atelier Yumia. Now whether or not it'll be a direct follow-up, like a direct sequel similar to the Ryza series, or sort of a spiritual successor sort of sequel where, while it does take place after the event of Yumia, you'll be able to follow a new protagonist. So I do think in the case that it would be a good way to see on how they can handle it. Now, I'm not going to go in too much spoilers for those who haven't played Atelier Yumia, as that's still a great game, and obviously that's around an 81 on Metacritic if I recall correctly. As well, it also sold about 300,000 units in its first 6 days, which is impressive. That makes it the fastest selling Atelier game. So I do think that obviously that they need to take some aspects to improve upon Yumia. One aspect I do think I want to see sort of toned down is the open zone aspect. As much as Yumia's open world was kind of nice, later parts of the game started to wear off and started getting a little repetitive, especially when you had to go through some of the same puzzles that didn't have much, new rhythm and just kind of felt a little bit generic at times. So I do think for the next one, it could sort of tone down the open world and make it more sort of sublinear, which I think that would be a good, nice change of pace, given the fact that we did have this as well as even Atelier Ryza 3 also go to its open zone. So I think having a more sublinear and sort of not too open environment would be a good idea. Upon that, I do think we should also, while they are obviously going to keep the combat from Atelier Yumia, I know lots of people didn't enjoy the combat as it felt too brainless and biomashy and just felt way too far from what Atelier is used to. I do think that they will obviously take the combat and hopefully just revamp it, like improve upon it, like maybe add more new skills, maybe make enemies, more aggressive so it doesn't feel too brainless, so you know when to dodge, as well as maybe parry, as well as maybe even throw items to perform cool combos. I do think a lot of refinements could be done to the combat system, and even make, say, the maximized mana surge, less of a hassle to activate so that you can activate it more easily. So I do think that the combat system obviously needs an overhaul and some improvement, so that could obviously, still appeal to the new people who enjoyed Yumia's combat, because I still enjoy it. I think the problem is that it was far too easy. I would also like to have obviously more bosses, because Yumia itself had like what, 4 bosses, maybe 5 if you include the Puni collab boss, as well as some of the DLC bosses you get to play. So I do think having, more bosses to really test out your skills is the way to go, I think. And also another matter is to also improve upon the building mechanic. As the building mechanic was very finicky and was just not fun to do at times. I know a game that handled this aspect really well was actually a game called Rune Factory Guns of Azuma, which did release not too long ago, and that handled its whole building mechanic easily with having a top-down sort of view kind of experience, opposed to Yumia's over-the-shoulder, which felt a lot more clunky in comparison. So if they were going to obviously make like a follow-up to Yumia and still use the building mechanic, then I do hope that they take that kind of aspect and improve upon it, like have say a top-down so we can see what we're building and control it to become much more smoother and much more easier. Another thing I would also obviously improve is the alchemy aspect, because I know a lot of people say that Yumia's alchemy is a bit too streamlined and just felt more about breaking the game and felt a little bit like an afterthought. So I think for this follow-up to Yumia, I do think that they should, increase the skill level of alchemy, just like they did with Resiana. So not only can you create more powerful items, but it also requires you to use alchemy more efficiently, especially to progress, since that's another thing. Another also is the story aspect. I know a lot of people really enjoy Atelier's story. The story for Atelier Yumia wasn't really, it wasn't really meant to be what Atelier is known for, because Atelier at best is known for character journeys, where you're more so invested in the character than the overall narrative itself. And while we do have good stories, like again with Yumia and even Resiana had a good story, it's more so about the character, more so about the journey than the actual destination. So I do think that obviously that they should maintain a balance between, the focus of Yumia's narrative, as well as the, traditional balance and lightheartedness and cozy aspects of the Atelier series. And even Resiana struck a good balance, where a lot of it was just, playing at your own pace and seeing what the characters were up to before the story would progress. I do think there should be a good balance between how the second one should handle its own story progression. Also, I do think that obviously, given that fact that there will be more sequels, obviously the next one will follow Yumia's case, which I think will be a good balance, especially for the fans who got into the series because of Yumia. So I think those who enjoyed Yumia will like what the second game of the new trilogy is, as well as the third game. But I think we should also balance between having the style of Atelier Yumia, as well as the traditional Atelier games that we had for Atelier Resiana, the Red Alchemist, and the White Guardian, as also Atelier Marie Remake, and Atelier Sophie 2. I do think there's also a good balance, and there's a reason for both a traditional Atelier game like Resiana, like Sophie 2, to coexist with the more newer Atelier games that go in a different direction to appeal to newcomers like Yumia, like even the Riser sequels and Riser itself. So I do think there's a good balance. If they were going to take aspects of say Resiana, I would also say the turn-based combat and keep focus on the Atelier side of things with the synthesis and more being lighthearted and being more character focused. I think it's a good direction. Obviously, they could just take what was good about Resiana, Red and White Alchemist, as well as also Sophie 2, and just build upon it. Have a series of games that literally appeal to the core fan base of Atelier that people really still love. Why they come back for Atelier, whether it's the turn-based combat, the focus on alchemy, or the light-hearted character journeys. I think that is something that is still awesome and still right there for the taking. So hopefully they can keep up that momentum. And who knows, maybe even do another sequel to Atelier Resiana, Red and White, or even just, obviously, maybe even bring back one of the older Atelier games that might need a follow-up. A lot of people really want to see the Dusk trilogy make a comeback, given the fact that we had the Iron series make a comeback with Lulua, and also the Mysterious series with Sophie too. So logically, we should have one for also the Dusk series. Like, I want to see like on how they can handle a fourth entry in the Dusk series, whether it be a direct sequel to one of their games or just a completely, epilogue sequel, which I think will wrap up the Dusk trilogy nicely, and I think will still be good for traditional Atelier fans who love that series or Atelier in general to come back to. And I think that really shows that traditional Atelier can still coexist with modern Atelier in a sense. And speaking of revisiting Atelier, I do think that obviously we should also have more remakes. I mean, the Atelier Marie remake was an amazing game, I obviously loved it, and I just hope to see more remakes, like obviously remake the rest of the Salzburg trilogy, like have Atelier Ellie and Lily remake, as well as even remake some of the other Atelier games that are still Japan exclusive, like the Grenade trilogy. Maybe even remaster or remake the My Alchemy duology, as I know some people really love those games. I think having a lot of those games would be awesome, especially not only for fans who never got to play those games, or also new fans who are maybe interested in what the Atelier series past is and want to see on how it went before we got to the Iron series. So obviously having more accessibility for the Atelier series is awesome, and it's something I want to see actually happen. I would love to see remakes of the Salzburg games. I would love to see remakes of even the Iris games, or the Grenade games, or even the My Alchemy games. Like, give me all of those, and I will be really happy with what they do next. And before we wrap up, I also talked to my community to give their insights of what they'd like to see the future of the series go to, and what they hope to see in terms of new games and whatnot. So I'm going to list down here from, first to last. So the first one is by Kitro, and he says, hoping for remake next, then Yumia 2, or completely new title, then another DX. Really love structure this year's Atelier games. That I also agree of. I do think we are due for another Atelier remake. As mentioned, we had one with Atelier Marie remake, which came out 2 years ago, and that was after we got Atelier Riser 3, so I think we're due for another follow-up to the Atelier Salzburg remake. So give me one for Lily and then Ellie. That would be really awesome. And for Yumia 2, I mean, I'm fine with that, though I'm really certain whether or not they would either go that route to repeat the Riser sequels, or just have a new protagonist that's set in the same continuity as the Yumia games to follow on and continue the story after Yumia's one was concluded. And even also having another DX. Well, that's really hard to say of what the next DX game is, because if we go by order, we had the Atelier Ireland series get the DX, as well as Dusk, as well as Mysterious, and after Mysterious we obviously got the Riser trilogy with its secret DX. So really the only deluxe editions we could hopefully get is the remasters, or maybe say the My Alchemy duology, the Grenade games, or even the Iris games. So it really depends. I mean, I would even expect maybe in the next 5 years or so that even Yumia might even get a DX, which I know some people might not be a fan of. I mean, some people are mixed upon the concept of Riser getting DX, especially when you look at Riser 2 and Riser 3, which were more recent games. They weren't, much as old as the first Riser. So hopefully, if it's say more remasters, then definitely some of the older ones would be really cool to see, I think. And the next one will have to go to my good friend the Memo X. I don't know how to say that, I'm very sorry. Memo X. And says here that I would hope for another remake of the older Atelier games, Atelier Marie, failing another mainline game that makes either Yumia or Resiana into next trilogy after Riser. That I also have to agree as well. Again, more Atelier remakes. I mean, we just got one for Atelier Marie, so I do think we need the sequels as well. And also, another note, we also should also have the original games also, translated and bundled with the remakes, just like we did with Marie, which was a nice move. Even if it was a paid thing to get by a deluxe edition, but even still, that was still amazing of them to do. So I do think we definitely would hope to get another remake. Obviously, I do think Lily should be next, and then Ellie will be next. And as for the next mainline game that will fall either to Yumia or Resiana, I really do think that, given the fact that Yumia has probably brought some newcomers into the mix, I definitely think a lot of people would still want to experience more of Yumia, because given the fact that some of the past Atelier games, they don't really play much or flow in the same way that Yumia does, which might be, tricky to follow on through. So I do think once they do make like a follow-up to Yumia, I do think those new fans could latch on to play the next one. And as for Resiana, maybe also do some follow-ups. I do think, given the fact that obviously the mobile game shut down, I do think we should have like more console variants of Resiana, like to continue the story in some way. Maybe even have like a full-on remake of the original mobile game, where you take all the assets of that and just make it to a console version. So those players who played Resiana Red and White, who may be confused by some of the story elements from the mobile game, can, catch on and learn what has exactly happened, what they mean by this. I do think that will be really cool. And obviously, I do think the Yumia series will probably be the next trilogy to go on for us. And the last one goes to my homie, Blue Flame. And he says here, I would like them to continue on this approach that they are already doing, making traditional turn-based Atelier games, and also having an action RPG Atelier game, and remaking remaster old games in this franchise. Again, he's spot on about this. I think that's a great approach they're doing, just like on how RGG Studio from Sega is approaching the Yakuza Like a Dragon series. I think having a good balance between action Atelier with the Yumia games, as well as traditional ones like Sophie 2 and Resiana, are a good goal, and that way to also make both sides of the Atelier fandom happy. Like the traditional fans can go and play games like Resiana Red and White, Sophie 2, while the new fans can enjoy the action RPG Atelier games that Yumia has gone through. So I think that's also really cool. And once again, yes, let's remake and remaster some of the old games, especially since some of them desperately need like a remake or remaster. Like again, the rest of the Salzburg trilogy, the Grenade, as well as also Iris, and especially Monokemia. Please, Koei Tecmo Gust, that will be so happy. I would be really happy. And that'll be it for me. Let me know down in the comments of what you guys would like to hope to see the future of the Atelier series go through. What are your suggestions of how the series should go for the next mainline games? And what remasters or remakes of old Atelier games would you like to see? And if you like what you've seen here, then by all means, like the video, hit the subscribe button if you're new, and hit the notification icon if you really want to see more Atelier content from yours truly. And with that said, special thanks to my patrons, and Mad Kaiser out.